So Miles, welcome to the Org3D podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's your first time joining us. You're very, very welcome. How are you doing today?
Good, man. As I said earlier, I'm just on my last cup. I just finished the pot of coffee, so I'm there, mentally alert.
Got it. So just pure natural energy from now on when that wears off for the rest of today.
That's the goal. Yeah, I'm trying to. It took a long time to get from 2 pots of coffee to 1 pot a day. So, yeah, that's the goal. No more caffeine for the rest of the day. We'll see if I through.
Well, maybe that's our first engagement point. People that are listening to this in a few weeks' time, when they look it over, they can let us know in the comments whether they think 1 pot of coffee is good going, or whether they think actually you need to cut down. I think you'll find it's good going.
I think so. Yeah, I think 1 pot's I think that's a good standard to live by.
For sure. Cool. All right. Well, Miles is a sales leader in the software space, not only the software space, but the marketing technology software space, which is the world that I operate in, which is why I wanted you to join us today. So we'll talk about a few bits over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. But I think, first of all, we're always interested in hearing about people's journey on this pod. So just talk to me a bit about your journey to where you are today, and then we can come on to WhatConverts. Interested to hear about your mission with those guys. But yeah, we've got an audience of sellers, other sales leaders. But yeah, I'm sure everybody would be interested to hear how you started out and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, it's so funny. And I think this is actually pretty common in the sales industry. The journey to get to sales it's never like a direct path. Like I've never met anyone who woke up and at 13 years old they were like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And they said, "I want to be in sales." Right? It doesn't exist.
Yep.
I actually went to school for engineering, so my background's very strange. But I learned sitting in a cubicle doing design work that engineering was not for me. A little too late, obviously. And so I got out in the field more in the construction management side of things, which was nice. I got to get around and talk to people. And I started working for a friend of mine, actually, who was starting his own contracting business. And we figured out that I was really good at winning over these general contractors and getting these contracts, right? So he had me start going to like the union hall and all this stuff and just chit-chatting with these people. And one day I was talking to a friend of mine, funny enough, a few beers deep in Mexico, and he worked for Zillow.com. And he was like, "Yeah, so what you're doing is sales." And I'd always thought of sales. I'm going to age myself, but if you remember the movie Matilda, and her dad,
I do. Great movie.
Great movie. Back to my childhood. Her dad was a used car salesman, and that's who I envisioned when I thought of salespeople, right? And just in my head, I was like, "No, I'm not a salesperson," right? Like, no, that's not me. And then I started talking about, what he did, and also a big factor, how much money he made. And I was like, okay, here I am. I was making a decent 6-figure income, working like 60 hours a week. Going out, driving all over, and these guys were making almost double what I was making, working like. But I got there and I found out some of them worked like 35 hours a week. Back in the day, Zillow, we used to have, alcohol. There was beer on some floors, and we had snack machines and arcades on every floor. It was ridiculous, right? And so that's how I got in. Not sure how I won that interview over with no sales experience, but they liked me. And somehow I ended up working up. There were quite a few months there where I was the number one rep for not just my region, but then also for the whole team for the company for a short period of time. Fantastic. So, yeah. And then I fell in with a mentor who was like, if you really want to develop your career, what you have to learn to do, the next step for you is how to replicate what you do in others. If you can make other people as capable as you are, that's where true success lies. And that's what I set out to do. And so luckily he pulled me in and taught me. Nick Taylor, great guy. If you ever look him up, he pulled me in and taught me how to how to be a sales leader versus a sales rep, which is a huge transition, by the way, and probably a more difficult transition than going from the engineering industry to sales, to be honest. So, and yeah, and then now I'm with a company called, I worked at Zillow for a while, went to a company called Modus, where Nick was, the main sales leader there and helped found that company. We got bought out by Compass, if you're
Hmm.
familiar in the real estate technology space. Went through that IPO, which was awesome. And now I'm with a company called WhatConverts. We're a MVI software, which is marketing value intelligence
Hmm.
software, which is becoming more and more popular. Something, it's not necessarily the automation stuff that you see with some of these, but it's definitely a leg up from these more basic call tracking and lead tracking softwares that you see. It kind of lives in between there. So
Interesting. Okay. MVI, that's a new abbreviation for to add to the
yeah,
pot.
yeah,
Cool. Okay.
familiar with it.
Yeah, yeah. And then so is that then coming into almost like, is it revenue attribution in terms of how did we get this, and working backwards, or is it working forwards and actually as part of that funnel?
Yeah, so it's almost both, right? So it's basically it's really interesting. You think like sales, right? We're in sales, you're in sales, I'm in sales, most of your listeners are probably in sales,
Hmm.
and we speak in dollars, right? And especially the sales leaders listening, they they know when you meet with marketing people don't ever talk dollars. They want to avoid the ROI conversation. What do they talk about? Clicks, impressions, views,
Hmm.
right? And at the end of the day, like, we don't care. Salespeople, we don't care about clicks or views or impressions, right? We don't even care about leads. Leads are good. It's a step in the right direction. But our language is dollars.
Hmm.
It's revenue, it's money. And what your clients care about, if you're a marketer, or what salespeople care about, is how much money did you bring me? How much revenue did the marketing team bring to the table? And that's what our software does. It gets salespeople, sorry, more coffee here. It gets them on the same language and starts the conversation of putting things into dollars. And when you can do that, when you can say, okay, I'm a marketing company. I brought you 3,000, 300, sorry, $300,000 in revenue
Hmm.
opportunities, right? Here's
Hmm.
$300,000 of opportunity. Well, you only closed on, 50,000 of that, but whose fault is that, right?
Hmm.
So it allows marketing people to prove the value of their marketing, prove that it's working, and then also dial in on what's working the best so that you can focus more energy on what's working and what's not, and actually increase that return on ad spend over
Hmm.
time.
Perfect. Perfect. Makes total sense. And I guess that's becoming more and more popular in terms of, I mean, it's been popular for a long time. Like, how can we like quantify our marketing efforts, of course, but I think at the moment, what I'm noticing when I'm speaking to people is that um, brand awareness campaigns, for example, where you may not be tracking anything really, are becoming less and less popular. And then even companies who were maybe working on that front for a while are now trying to do everything performance related. So that, even if it is just measuring these clicks, these impressions, these views, at least we're measuring something that's pretty
Yeah.
tangible. And you're taking it a step further,
Yeah.
saying
Well,
actually,
and
let's measure these dollars.
yeah, well, and you'll notice historically, and I obviously haven't been around for this as much, but I was chatting with another mentor colleague of mine who's been in the industry for 30 some years. And he said in '09, the exact same thing happened, right?
Hmm.
Prior to '09, you had all these companies and they were like, oh, brand awareness. And yeah, this is a branding campaign. And they didn't care about the return on ad spend, the return on investment of dollars because they had so much money,
Hmm.
right? Because in '05, '06, '07, people were just making money hand over fist. And you
Hmm.
saw that again in 2020, right? COVID happened and everybody in sales came in and, you know, making money out of their minds. Jobs,
Hmm.
recruiters were hunting you down, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and people were willing to spend tons of money on branding, just like, oh yeah, let's do this marketing campaign. Well, we didn't get that many leads, but it was brand awareness. It's fine. They were
Hmm.
justifying it, right? Well, now you can't justify that those dollars because the economy's turned rather quickly. So, and every salesperson will tell you that it's not the same game this
Hmm.
year that it was a year ago, or especially 2 years ago, right?
Hmm.
So that's where we need to know exactly what we're getting for our money.
Yeah, for sure. So headline is you're giving marketers quotas as well as salespeople.
Yeah, basically, that's my dream.
That's just,
Every salesperson has made this statement. Wouldn't the world be a better place if we all had quotas? Every
yeah.
industry, every you know, my current CEO, I've got a very strict outlined performance metric, like performance guide
Mhm.
standard that I hold all my reps, all my team members accountable to.
Mhm.
And he shows it off to all these other departments. He's like, how can we build something like this black and white, this, set in stone performance standard? How can we build that across every department? Because especially in the remote industry, the remote work that we're doing, our company is 100% remote. Accountability becomes a huge factor, right? And how best to hold people accountable than to say, hey, you have a quota, and even to take it a step farther and say, hey, you get paid based on performance, right? So unfortunately, like I said, most salespeople believe the world would be a better place if everybody had quotas, but it's not the case. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I got inspiration for that. I think I watched like like Corporate Bro. I think I watched a Bro video that was like doing a spiff on giving marketing quotas, something like that. So yeah, there you go. You guys should team up maybe. Maybe that can be like
I
a
love
campaign.
that.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Me too.
I was just I slide into his DMs every once in a while. I'll comment on his posts and stuff. And he was actually in Montana golfing not too long ago, and I made a comment to somebody, and they were like, "Man, remember when we were at Zillow and we had sadness written on the window?" And he was just now he's off flying around golfing in Montana. It's great.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Cool. Okay, so you were touching on there are certain things that have happened in the macro environment which has meant that people are more conscious of where their dollars are going. So that brings us on to what I wanted to talk with you about around what's the current market like? Do you think things are getting more difficult for sellers? Because that's what I'm hearing out there. And then if so, what do you think people can do to adapt to current environment? To get closer to those quotas and maybe jump some of those hurdles that they're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, like you said, I think it's pretty universal, the consensus that the market has shifted and selling is harder, right? And I think the biggest thing to realize on a sales leader, from a sales leader perspective, the biggest thing to realize is that we were hunting and begging and throwing out crazy offers to get decent, not good, decent salespeople in the door, right? And these standards of what's a good salesperson, what's a bad salesperson, like these quota metrics, they were made in 2012, 2015, and we're kind of living off of these standards, right? And so in 2020 and 2021, and even in early 22, you had people just crushing these quotas out of the water, and you're like, oh, they're such a good salesperson. Well, now they're not doing as well. And so we're in our heads, we're like, well, it's maybe it's not them, right? Maybe it's not them. But the problem is that sometimes it is.
Hmm.
You have to look because let's say that my boss always says there's 3 or 4, I can't remember, 3 or 4 levels to a salesperson, right? And like you have your feature seller, feature dumping, right? We all probably heard those terms. We have people who can go in and they can read off a script and they can go through a demo and they just go through and click on every feature and they talk about the product and they walk through it, right? And that's like the bottom level of sales. Okay. Well, that was selling before because people had so much money. And then you have the people who they're going to like do a little bit of digging and they're going to find a pain point. And they're going to present us as a solution, right? And maybe a surface level pain point. And that was working. Those people were doing really well. Well, now, because every single company they overhired and now they're overstretched on budgets and they don't want to do layoffs. They're trying to keep people employed. They're trying to continue generating revenue. So now if you want to sell to these super financially conscious companies, these B2B sales, when you're selling to a company that's so tight with their money, they need to get a good value. They need to know that they have a measurable return for every investment they make, and a quick return. It can't be, oh yeah, you'll see a return 3, 4 years down the no. Like they want to know they're going to get their money back quickly. And the only way to accomplish that is, one, you have to have a very skilled salesperson. If you don't, you're going to have to train your salespeople to be skilled in doing like a deep dive needs analysis, right? Getting to the root causes of what this business's problem is, and then setting yourself up as a value, as an asset, right? And having a clear roadmap built out like, hey, here's the results you're going to see. Here's how long it's going to take to achieve those results. So, if you invest X amount of dollars, you're going to see that return within a year, right? You'll get that money back, whether it's, and maybe it's not in dollars, maybe you're getting it back in time and man hours. But again, it all comes down to the same thing, dollars, right? Why would I buy a software? Why am I going to go spend, $200,000 a year on a software, right? It's because that $200,000 a year is going to make me money, right? And if it's by saving time, well, then it saves me man hours, which saves me money. So it's still making me money. It's still increasing my margin.
Yeah.
So and that's the mindset you have to train your salespeople to take, which is hard. And it takes not just you can't have a salesperson that just reads off a script. You have to have a salesperson that has a high IQ, but more importantly, also a high EQ, and a lot of grit, determination, and drive. So
yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense. So, I think comes back to what we were saying before about quantifying, right? Everything's about how do we quantify the value using data maybe to tell the story using some actual numbers, and also setting on that value and maybe looking at the emotional side of things. You talked about EQ, so developing a connection with a prospect as opposed to, I think you said featureism, just clicking through. That doesn't wash anymore, which totally makes sense. And then you also talked about training, right? So maybe you've got people on your team that are have the ability to do this, but we need to train them. They're not going to walk in through the door with it all the time. So being conscious of that from a leadership perspective, which you obviously are because you've been talking to me about it today, and then rolling out that across your team. So equipping them equally. So the salesperson needs to take accountability on their side, but also from a leadership perspective, you need to take accountability to equip them with those things you talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're only going to get so far if you don't give your team the resources and tools that they need to be successful. You have to set them up for success and then show them how to use those tools to be successful. At that point, if they're not successful, I mean, we all know the saying, you can lead a horse to water, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing you'll see too going on right now is a lot of churning, a lot of cutting fast. Even at my own company, we're like, okay, how can we determine if somebody's a good fit quickly? And if they're not, then let's get them out. Because that's money that I'm investing into somebody who's not giving me the time and energy back. They're not returning my investment, right? Well, I'd rather take those dollars and go invest in someone else who does want to succeed. So
yeah, for sure. And then on that, like recruitment market's funny at the moment. You talked about throwing out all these offers to candidates a year or 2 years ago. I remember it well. Candidates were in huge demand, and it's turned on its head a little bit. Obviously, unfortunately, we've seen layoffs. Some really good people out there looking for work at the moment. So the market sort of turned on its head. But what's your advice for sellers out there who are looking for a new role potentially and struggling to get in through the door? Applications aren't working, not quite getting in front of the right people. So from a sales leadership perspective, anything that if you were hiring right now, you'd be looking out for in terms of somebody's approach to getting themselves in front of you?
yeah, so getting a job is just selling yourself, right? And you have to use the exact same process. So, take a step back and see where you're missing, right? If somebody misses quota, what do? We step back, you sit down with the rep, you meet with them, you go, okay, did you do this? All right, well, you missed on demos. Okay, so you didn't have enough demos to get to quota. So why'd you miss on demos? Well, maybe you didn't do enough calls, or maybe you weren't putting enough leads in the pipe, or maybe you're working your pipeline too long, whatever it is. You got to figure out and find out what that root cause is. So if I'm a rep and I'm trying to get a job, if I'm not getting an interview, then I know that the issue is my application, my resume. Right. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go polish my LinkedIn. I'm going to go work on my resume. I mean, don't be afraid to reach out to a friend who's in the recruitment industry and send your resume. I mean, I even still, if I'm out looking for a job, the first thing I do is send my resume over to like 6, 7, 8 different people and say, hey,
Hmm.
check this out for me, make some edits. What do you think? And then I take all that feedback and I modify and improve. Same thing with your LinkedIn. Your LinkedIn nowadays is your resume. Your resume should be easily a glance at someone's LinkedIn. You should be able to see everything they've done, everything they've accomplished, and what kind of employee they're going to be.
Hmm.
So if you're not getting the interviews, then that's where you look, right?
Hmm.
Go fix those issues. If you are getting interviews, but you're not moving past, then it's the same thing, right? Okay, what am I saying? What am I doing? One thing that I was really blown away with, I said to a gal one time, I said, you interview so well, da da da. I was like, and it spiraled into a conversation. He said, I used to ask when she missed out on a job, she'd been applying for jobs for some time, she was laid off. She said, when I missed out on a job, I used to reach out to the recruiter and say, hey, I know that interview was recorded. Can you
Hmm.
send it to me? And how many times I tell my reps all the time, are you watching your demos?
Hmm.
Are you going back and watching your demos? Are you watching your facial expressions? Are you listening to your tonality and your word choice, right? It's the exact same thing, right? And I think so many people, they go, oh, and you'll see it with the senior reps, good, accomplished reps who have been 150% to quota their whole lives. And they're so confident and arrogant. And they're just like, yeah, my resume speaks for itself, my LinkedIn, like, oh, and they go into this interview with this swagger and they're like, you owe me, you should want me, you should be grateful that I would come work for this company, right? And especially right now, because a lot of these people are taking pay cuts because they're so desperate
Yep.
for a job, because they're not at Amazon or Facebook making 200K anymore, right? 300K. And they're like, I need something. So they're looking at these jobs that are 120, 140, 150 OT versus the 200, 250 they're used to. And it's like, hey, well, why aren't you working? Why haven't you been working for 5 months if you're this amazing? Sell
Hmm.
me, right?
Hmm.
So, but they have to do it. They have to take a step back. They have to do interview process, same thing. Do a needs analysis. What do I need to do? Where am I missing? Where can I improve? Right, and then execute.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And going back to basics, like you said, just on that resume piece, LinkedIn, like, yeah, very important. I can testify to that in terms of I hear hiring managers say it to me all the time, and not just now, but like as far back as I can remember. Yeah, I prefer to just to look at the LinkedIn, and like they'll probably look at the LinkedIn and then they've probably made a decision by that point anyway. And if they haven't, they might click on the resume. But like these guys probably haven't got time to go through a whole resume. So LinkedIn is so important, as you said.
Yeah,
Um, Resumes equally, if you've got a HR team looking through applications or things like that, they probably rely quite heavily on resumes.
and
Um,
numbers, like real
and
data
yeah.
points, right? Like I want to see where you ranked, and I'm
Hmm.
okay, because a good sales rep typically they have something to prove, right? They're whether it's a chip on their shoulder or they have some sort of thing that drives them, right? We need motivated, driven, hungry people. So it's really interesting if you see. I have a colleague that actually is now the head of our partner channel, and on his resume it says something like he was, oh, I finished off the year number 4 on my team or something like that, right? And I love seeing that on a resume. And you ask
Hmm.
people, how did that make you feel to be
Hmm.
number 4? Right? Because that's awesome on a company. There was 400 sales reps. You're number 4. That's great, right? That's
Hmm.
an accomplishment. But a good salesperson, you ask them, how did that make you feel? And they'll go, man, pissed,
Hmm.
infuriated,
Yep.
angry. Like I was so upset. And why? You finished number 4 out of hundreds of reps. Why? Because I wasn't number 1.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, but you have to have that data point. There has to be something that can start that conversation. And I love to see accolades and records and rankings
Hmm.
on
Yep.
on and on LinkedIn as well. So
Hmm. Yeah, totally agree. And again, comes back to quantifying, um, and making it clear. What have we done? We're
numbers
measured
and
on
values.
numbers. We talk in numbers, as if you're a seller, we're talking in numbers in the job, so we need to do that on the resume too. And also, I don't know what you think about this, but just to wrap up, 'cause I know we're coming up to time. Um, I want to see those numbers too, and hiring managers do, but we don't need to have like beaten quota every single quarter for the last 10, 15 years. Because does
No,
has anyone done that? I don't know, probably not. So like it's about, yeah, showing a good track record, but also like owning it, being honest about it, and being like, yeah, I didn't hit it that time, but look what else I've done. And I think people are a bit shy of that sometimes. They think that's just going to like cancel them out. Well, in my view, it's not. And hiring managers tell me that as well. That's how I develop that view from hearing hiring managers speak. So,
I love that. I love hearing, I saw you, so you missed quota this month. Why? What happened?
mhm,
Tell me. And the thing that you're looking for the most there, and I mean, I've done it myself. I missed quota as a sales leader. I've never missed a quota as a rep. And as a
mhm,
sales leader, I missed my first quota. I think it was in 2022, actually. And I'll talk about that in interviews all the time. I'm like, yeah,
mhm,
why did I miss? I can tell you exactly why I missed. I was up for hours till 10 p.m., multiple nights sweating, like, at the tail end of the quarter and post quarter. What did I do wrong? Where did I fail?
mhm,
Right. And then having that that self-awareness is huge. And I
mhm,
think that's something that if you have a rep who's never has failed, that's almost, I don't want to say it's a red flag, right?
mhm,
But if I am interviewing and a rep says, no, I've never missed a quota, it's going to make me wonder, right? Because, okay, well, was it too easy? Were the metrics too
mhm,
easy, right? Like, did you have to struggle? Like, how hard were you actually working?
mhm,
If you do miss a quota, right? If you do fail, what are you going to do?
mhm,
Because we want somebody who can fight through, that adversity, that struggle, right? That failure, and get back up, because that's what sales is about. So
mhm. Yeah, for sure. Sure. Cool. Interesting stuff. I've enjoyed this. Thanks for joining me today. We're coming up to time. But yeah, some really good takeaways, I think, for everybody. So Miles, for those who have heard you speak about your career, your leadership style, or a little bit about your leadership style, about what converts, et cetera, et cetera. Are you hiring at the moment? Should anybody, if they're looking, reach out to you guys? What's the story there?
absolutely, yeah. So we're hiring SDRs. I don't think we're not hiring any sales executive or account
Hmm.
executive at the moment. I like to promote from within. I actually just
Hmm.
promoted an SDR to an account executive. So
Awesome.
building out that team with more SDR backfill, and then um, I believe that not it wouldn't be under me; it would be under our partnership channel, but they are hiring an account manager as well. So, you know, if you're interested, it's great. We're actually the fastest growing MVI company. I
Hmm.
love that. Throw that acronym out there
That's
again.
right. That's right.
Yeah, we're the fastest growing one out there.
Yeah.
We have, I think we're ranked number one in our category
Okay.
on G2. So things are going well, and it's a real fast growing company. A great place to be.
Love it. And do you want, ideally, feel like I'm taking a job brief from you now, but for these guys who are listening to this, who maybe would be interested in that SDR role, are you looking for people that have a bit of experience doing SDR stuff before? What's your thought process on that?
My best SDR right now, who I just promoted to an AE after 6 months, he averaged like 200% quota every month.
Hmm.
Uh, he was a physical therapist. He
Hmm.
was my
Well,
physical therapist
oh wow.
before I recruited him. So if you have experience, great. My second best SDR definitely had, I think, a couple years, a year and a half of experience. But my best SDR had none. He'd
Hmm.
never even considered sales as
Hmm.
a career. So I like them all.
Got
Just
it.
come hungry, hungry and ready to learn.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Cool. Okay, well that's good to know. Listeners take note of that. If that sounds interesting to you. And yeah, look, we'll finish up here. Miles, thanks again so much for joining us. It's been great. And yeah, hopefully we'll maybe see you again one day.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jacob.